I would like to ask everyone to please stand for the presentation of the colors by the Austin Police Department. And would you please remain standing as we have pledges of allegiance led by Commissioner Burris and an invocation by Chaplain Eric DeVoe of the Round Rock Police Department.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas
flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct pleasure to be able to do this. I'm new to your state, and I love it here. It's warm and inviting. I feel like it's home. It's a great honor to stand before you and bless you fine people. It's my greatest calling and honor to serve those who serve, sometimes putting their lives on the line every day, not knowing if they're going to come home or not to their families. So with that, I would ask that we go into relational communication with our Father. Heavenly Father, we ask that you help us be more like you. Help us to love like you, Father. Help us to be the people that you've made us to be. Help us to put others before ourselves. Challenge us as your children to grow. Alleviate any unnecessary burdens. May those that know you and those who do not know you come to have a closer relationship with you, Father. May we grow in wisdom through you, O Father. May we find favor with you as we walk with you. The lives that we are given through you. Thank you, Father, for this day. May we not miss any one opportunity that you lay before us that could change our lives with the lives of others. We are imperfect people, Father. Impart wisdom upon us and help us to make decisions in your precious name. We thank you for being with us and choosing us to walk on this earth. We'd ask that you'd bless everybody here and everybody that can't be with us, and those that are in the field today serving us and protecting us. These men and women are the walking display of confidence, courage, and service. And we ask that you bless them all, Father. And in your Son's precious name we pray, in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Chaplain, thank you very much for being here with us today and taking time to be here. Welcome to Texas, and welcome to your first Texas summer. You mentioned it being warm and sunny, and we'll give you a lot of that. So let me go ahead and recognize the Austin Color Guard, Sergeant Mason Wu, Detective Jared Ralston, Detective Shane Hausmans, and Officer Trinidad Garcia. Let's give them a round of applause because they look absolutely fantastic. They just did a great job. Sarah, would you please do roll call for us today? Here.
Here.
Present.
Here.
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 We do have a quorum. So welcome to those of you that are here in person with us today, and for those that are joining us online or watching us at a later day and time. As everyone knows, we have come to the end of the regular session, and what a whirlwind the last 6 months has been. I think as most of us know, there's many pieces of legislation that have been passed that touch the law enforcement profession, and more importantly, touch TCOLE. We very much appreciate the support of the legislature, both through the support in the legislation, but also the funding support that we've received to carry out the mandates. We are all committed to work together with the constituents and the public to carrying out all of the various legislative mandates that have been given to us. It's going to require that the law enforcement community come together. We appreciate the fact that we were able to work with many of our constituents throughout the legislative process as these bills went through. And I think that resulted in legislation that is better and stronger for the state and for the citizens of this state. I also wanted to take the opportunity to thank our interim executive director and Director Grigsby and all of your teams for the work that you did the past 6 months. And it's not over. Now we have the legislation, and now we have to implement it. So there's going to be a lot of work required, a lot of heavy lifting. We're going to continue to need the support of the constituents as we move forward with advisory committees. And we want to make sure that we produce the best plans, and that's going to take all of us coming and working together. So we look forward to that process, which will begin shortly, and we'll talk a little bit more about. A reminder that we have the awards ceremony tomorrow at the Capitol at 10 o'clock. I'm going to ask the audience, how many of you have been to the awards ceremony? Fantastic. Hope to see more hands go up next year. It's an incredible day. I want to thank everyone who took the time to nominate someone for one of these awards. We have just incredible work that's being done by our law enforcement professionals throughout the state, and it's our duty, it's our duty to recognize them, and tomorrow's going to be one of those days where we get to recognize them and celebrate the great work that they're doing. So I would encourage all of you, I believe it's 10 o'clock at the Capitol. Okay. From the workshop yesterday, we talked a little bit about the meetings. Please stay in touch or check back on the website. We'll be finalizing the August meeting dates. Of course, we'll have the October meeting will be in conjunction with the annual conference, and we're finalizing the December dates and location. We did talk about we talked about the 2024 dates, and I want to thank Patricia for moving us along yesterday. We were able to, I think, set some tentative dates with a meeting in Austin in February, back in Austin in April, but in conjunction with the Peace Officers Memorial. June, again in Austin because of the awards ceremony. We're looking at August in El Paso and October back in Corpus in conjunction with the annual conference. So again, please check back on the website, and We'll hopefully have some of those dates finalized, and you can get them on your calendars. So with that being said, I'm going to move on to agenda item number 2, which is the approval of the minutes from the April 20th meeting. Any discussion?
I make a motion, we approve the minutes.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Let's move on to agenda item number 3. And we will move Interim Director Beecham. We will have you report out first, please, sir.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Thank you all for our staff and attendees. As you stated earlier regarding the sunset in this legislative session, I think the message overall from the sunset bill and all corresponding legislation is that certainly TCOLE not only has a place in the law enforcement community,
No.
how about that?
Yeah.
Doing better.
I didn't like what I said anyway, so that works better. Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, attendees. Going back to what Chairman Lameau said regarding the sunset bill and all related legislation, I think one thing is clear from the session and both the resources in the form of 26 full-time employees and a new budget of $14.5 million per biennium for the agency, that TCOLE has not only a place, as normally in the sunset review would say, but also an enlarged role in the law enforcement profession. In a few minutes, actually I'll step over there right now if it pleases the commissioners, and we'll go through some of the items we discussed yesterday in the workshop, primarily the most urgent of all the important items in the sunset bill, the advisory boards and the corresponding databases. So I'll walk over there and I'll make sure the microphone's on this time.
And when you came in, you should have gotten a QR code. The QR code will have on that the presentation that you'll see back here. It'll have some Target 100 information and also a matrix. So I would refer you to that as we go through the presentations.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. As everybody in the audience can see, either on your phone or up on the overhead, you have these categories of advisory boards and databases. And what these are in reference to SB 1445, the TCOLE Sunset Bill. The advisory boards, I will go over those briefly and then go through how they interplay with the two databases that TCOLE is charged with creating and maintaining. First thing, this is overall, the thing to remember is the F5 process, the F5 reports, the designations of honorable, general, and dishonorable have, as of March 1st of 2024, and you'll hear that date repeatedly as I go through these, March 1st of 2024, those designations will no longer be on the F5 form for persons separated on or after March 1st, 2024. And that's important to keep in mind as we go through what's in the confidential database and the hiring and misconduct process of TCOLE and any prospective hiring law enforcement agency in the state. Okay, first the advisory boards. We'll spend our attention mainly on the hiring and misconduct advisory board. And again, commissioners and for those in the audience and people watching online, there is a proposed rule in front of the commissioners today regarding the procedures, composition, and basic frameworks for these advisory boards. As was discussed yesterday in the workshop, as we go through in the next few weeks, we'll be populating those advisory boards for further certification in the August meeting. But as again, we refer to the date of March 1st, 2024. We'll need to get moving on these very quickly, and certainly we want to solicit any one who wants to participate, let us know here at the agency, and we will go about populating all 3 of these. So let's talk the first one again. Hiring and Misconduct Advisory Board. The advisory board is going to be charged with creating a model policy for hiring and misconduct procedures. Now, if you look over to the right, my pointer doesn't work on this screen, so if you look at the big yellow box that has 3 blue sub-boxes in it, you got to come up with a model policy the advisory board with for all law enforcement agencies in the state that contains personnel files, TCOLE records, and this is a TCOLE requirement that TCOLE has to get out-of-state post records for people coming in out of state. These are part of the new hiring and background procedures as prescribed by SB 1445, the TCOLE Sunset Bill. Now, we're still in the gold confidential hiring database. Let's talk about those personnel files first. The personnel files are defined in the statute as violations of law or sustained instances of misconduct that resulted in disciplinary action at the agency. Any person that's personnel files will have to be sent to TCOLE. If they meet that criteria, they qualify as a personnel file, and they'll have to be sent to TCOLE within 30 days of a licensee separation. Now, those who work with civil service statutes will recognize that language because it's the same language as applied to everyone now, as at least relates to sustained misconduct or violations of law. Those will have to be submitted again to TCOLE within 30 days after the licensee separates. Going down, again, in the gold confidential database, you look at TCOLE records. Those are all the other records. Those are proof of misconduct investigations that may have not necessarily ended up in a sustained allegation, but it is at least a summary or some indication of there was some investigation and the misconduct was unfounded. That's what the TCOLE records are under that second blue box under Section 4535 of the bill. And again, the out-of-state post records, if they're applicable, those will have to be viewed as well by a prospective hiring agency. So to sum it up, in the gold confidential database, as it is on this screen, in the confidential TCOLE database, these are all the items that will have to be examined and reviewed by a prospective hiring agency. Now, everyone will see off to the side there the designated decertification database. The advisory board will come up with identifying one before March 1st, 2024 as well. So that's it for the personnel files and the misconduct as it relates to the hiring database. Now we'll go back over the left side, the advisory boards again. The next advisory board will be charged with establishing minimum standards for law enforcement agencies. There's some new language in the bill as it relates to the continued operation of agencies or the creation. You'll see standards in there. The important thing to remember about this is for agencies, there will also be consideration for location, population, and things of that. So we'll have a standard, and obviously the advisory boards will be composed of people from across the state, various size agencies and geographic regions. Do you have a question, Commissioner Hess?
I do. So during this time frame of that, are we going to be placing a moratorium on issuing new licenses? Do we have a lot pending? What's kind of the status of
Well,
that?
we could certainly, with some criteria, we could review those. We could review those incoming applications if we had some criteria to base it on, but we certainly won't have a standard to deny those agencies until March of next year. But certainly we will take any direction that you want to give us on that.
Maybe temporary?
So just to ensure I hear you correctly, we do not have statutory authority after September 1 and before the advisory board adopts, or before we adopt the rule to tell someone no, unless there's, I mean, I'm just trying to, it seems disingenuous if people are, if
Sure.
new agencies are coming in September 1, I think the stance ought to be, you need to wait till March. Obviously, you've waited this long to not have an agency, so you can probably wait till March till the new rules are in place, then you can be in compliance with that?
No,
Just a personal,
No, I think that's a procedural thing that we could look at, because you're exactly right. Between September and March, we know what's going to come, and for some reason, because it talks about the continuing operation of the agencies. If they meet the criteria, or what criteria may not exist between September and March, and after March it changes, it puts the agency in a bad position.
very bad, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, I'm
Certainly
sorry.
understood. Thank you. Any other questions on that particular provision? Any input from staff? Other thoughts? We'll move along to the examination of a licensee, the advisory board at the bottom. Cullen, why don't you walk through the commissioners through this one as well?
Good morning, Commissioners. Under the examination of licensees, commonly we refer to those as fit-for-duty exams. The new statute would change to where an agency would have to adopt a model policy developed by the advisory board or a policy substantially like the model policy. But it also changes based on advice from the advisory board, the potential content of what constitutes the physical examination and the psychological examination. So this advisory board obviously is going to have some expertise from the medical field, from the mental health field, to help us arrive at that policy. Ultimately, the advisory board, the work product is the model policy that goes out, and then it would be left at the local level. The fit-for-duty exam, the determination of the fit-for-duty exam is left with the chief administrator from the local agency. What's added in the new legislation is if a chief administrator asks an appointee to submit to a fit-for-duty exam, whether that's physical or psychological examination, and that appointee fails to do so or refuses to do so, the chief administrator is obligated to notify us of the refusal, and we would have the authority to ultimately suspend that license until that was remedied. There's an appeals process in it, so for the due process, a show cause of why that person's refusing to take that examination. But I think the key elements to take away is that the notion of fit for duty still remains with the local controller, the local agency. So they determine when it's required. Should an appointee fail or refuse to do so, then there's a state remedy for that.
Any questions about the basic composition and overall procedural due process? Obviously, a lot of it's going to be worked out as the advisory board continues to meet regarding the examination of a licensee board.
I just have is mine on? I have a comment only. There was significant input throughout the whole process with this legislation from various organizations, correct? Including, if you could kind of list the people in the room that worked with the legislators on this, I think that would be helpful for our audience to hear.
Absolutely, Commissioner Burris. Like you said, there have been a tremendous amount of stakeholder input in this whole process. That includes our labor organizations, the Primary Cleat TMPA, Houston Police Officers Union, Dallas Police Association. We've got our management organizations, the Sheriff's Association, the Texas Police Chiefs Association, the Justices of the Peace and Constables Association, all of those and many others that aren't mentioned here have had a lot of input. They've been diligently working on this with great interest, and to their credit, I think that input has been heard by the legislature. from every aspect. And so we're certainly grateful to have the stakeholder input that is critically needed because it affects everybody involved.
So thank you for listing all the agencies involved. I think it's actually more than I thought were involved. I knew there was a lot, but I think you listed several more. You know, kind of historically for TCOLE, for our officers out there, we'll go through a session in the past, way in the past, and the legislators would come up with all sorts of things that our peace officers have to do now, right? And you got to do this training and that training, and you need these hours and those hours. And inevitably, TCOLE then has to kind of codify it in our rules and do all that work, and then our officers get upset that TCOLE's making me do these terrible things. Again, not us. We have to implement what the legislature has told us is required of our peace officers. It is very nice to see as time has progressed, and particularly this session, that it wasn't just a few organizations going and, you know, in essence lobbying, but not that term, advocating for peace officers' interests. And that's great to see, but a lot of times, okay, we heard what you had to say, but we're going to do what we're going to do anyway, is kind of sometimes what happens over at the Capitol. This particular session, the amount of input, the amount of collaboration between all of the different organizations working alongside each other, working with TCOLE, getting in those offices and really digging down into the details of what was going to come down anyway. So if you know certain legislation is going to be passed anyway, you need to have a seat in the room, right? Like, you want to be in the room where it happens, as it's said. So a lot of thanks to all the organizations that spent so much time out there. I know every time I went to the Capitol this year, I saw people from all sorts of these organizations just there at the ready to answer any questions any legislators had, and to sit in the room and parse the language to be sure that we didn't have any real negative effects. So you never know once things get implemented in practice what may happen, but I want everyone out there to understand that you had a lot of advocacy from a lot of individuals, and obviously from TCOLE as a whole. So thank you all again. As Commissioner Presiding Officer Lamo stated, thank you for your work. It was long. It was more involved than ever before, so it was especially long. Special sessions are still going, but I think we're probably done with our part of everything, fingers crossed. So thank you all again.
Thank you, Commissioner Burris. And on that note, I think the Sunset Bill in general and TCOLE's role, as I discussed at the beginning of my report, I think it speaks to that collaboration and TCOLE's role and as a partner with all the members of the regulated community and the public. And I think certainly you see that role as it's envisioned by the legislature and the stakeholders within this Sunset Bill. Any questions about the confidential database or the other advisory boards? And then if not, I will cover the officer service reports in the public database. For the benefit of everyone, this is the bottom right-hand corner of the graphic on the overhead. This is the public database. This contains information where, like other licensing boards, for instance, for teachers, for attorneys, pharmacists, for doctors, they have a similar licensee lookup where a member of the public or anyone can look on the website, look up a particular licensee. This database under the statute requires the date the officer has completed the basic training course, whether the officer is in compliance with the continuing ed requirements and the continuing education course is completed. That would be in compliance, out of compliance, and courses completed. total hours of training the officer has completed, and the date the officer's license was issued. This is information very analogous to, or similar, or if not exactly the same as you'll find on other licensing agencies' website for their licensees. An important note on this, you will see there is a rule requirement for this. The establishment of the database is actually next September, September 2024, and it requires TCOLE to promulgate a rule regarding a waiver or opt-out provision for agencies to submit on behalf of officers for safety or undercover purposes. So that will be something that you'll be looking at in the next few months as we go through the rulemaking process. Any questions on the final questions on the advisory boards or databases? Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, there was a few items that we discussed yesterday regarding the training credit approval processes and procedures, and is to follow up on those. Starting September 1st of this year, TCOLE will adhere to the rule as it regards to training provider outlines and course instructor biographies. The previous policy that's existed for a couple of decades related to proprietary letters, allowing proprietary letters to exist in a training file in lieu of that information. Starting September 1st, we'll be looking into compliance with the actual rule moving forward. And prior to that, as we discussed yesterday, we'll send out several communications to the regulated community, and knowing that this is coming, and so everyone will have an opportunity to get in compliance. And we'll also bringing to you in the next few months regarding information or training that is either marketed or promoted as TCOLE approved, TCOLE certified, requirements for that, if that's actually the case, and to ensure that when this material is marketing, that is actually either certified, approved, or pre-approved by TCOLE. That will be coming in a few months. And that concludes my report.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
what are we trying to fix with the proprietary letter? Just like in executive version, since I wasn't at yesterday.
We want to make sure that agency policies are comporting with the rules, and the policies that we've promulgated out in the field comport with what the actual rule says. The proprietary letter policy was advised by the agency whenever it started a couple decades ago. Unfortunately, that's contrary to what the actual rule requirements are.
Yeah, so it came about as a result of actually being able to get proprietary stuff from somebody you bring in as a trainer, right? So I foresee some problems here with this. I know basically what's been happening is the policy has been going against what the rule said, right? However, I think there's some very good reason why that is there. If there is an issue where we haven't been able to get that on audit, that would be a good reason to maybe change what the policy is, but I don't see. At my agency, I know when we bring in somebody that has proprietary information, they want to keep their stuff proprietary, and we follow the rules. The bio's still there. Here's the letter. Here's the contact if you want to go see that information. But I foresee for agencies, this is going to be an issue for training academies to be able to get some of this stuff because people just aren't going to give up every single thing that they have and give it carte blanche to be in the file. So I have a little bit of concern over that, but obviously I missed yesterday. But what are we trying to fix? Is there been an issue with audits that I'm unaware of, or we're shaking heads? Yes. So
we certainly had a recent investigation into training provider files to where it was a recurring issue where in lieu of the information, the outline or the biographical information of the speakers, proprietary letter was in the file instead of that information for really no purpose other than, and I understand if there's proprietary information for an instructor that they want protected versus what the practices unfortunately become, at least with respect to the investigation and the instances where it occurred, it seems like that's the default for some.
So is this a one-off, or is this rampant?
Well, it's occurred in several instances in this one investigation.
So this is, okay, so this is so I guess for me, is this a shotgun approach that all of us trainers have to now do this? Or is this, if we have an issue with one training provider, then I think we need to address that with the one training provider that's not doing their records right and make them be in compliance with what they have? Because it sounds like to me, they've skated this a little bit and went too far with the proprietary letter versus
Sure.
What it is. But, you know, at the end of the day, the rule is the rule, right? So, and I think that's the stance, right? So,
I certainly believe that there is a continuum between requiring someone to put every bit of information that they believe is their proprietary information, certainly. But there's also, as you said, the rule is the rule. At some point, we're going to have something to reflect what the material is for the purposes of the training file and transparency. I do believe we can come up with a solution that covers all those interests.
okay, thank you. I don't have anything else, Madam Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Just to respond to Commissioner Hester's inquiries, my understanding of this is in lieu of putting in the basics, and it's not all this proprietary information. We're not talking, I believe, about, you know, a binder of the details of it. What the agency is looking for is you've got to have your I'm at a loss of words. The outline,
Lesson plan.
the lesson plan. Thank you, the lesson plan, and things like that, just to prove up that what you're teaching is at the correct standard that we're looking for, because we have to then officers are receiving credit for that. So if we don't know what's being taught, then we can have issues like the issue that came up, right? So I can't imagine, given the amount of information with all these databases, everything else that we're trying to get, that we're wanting to include, you know, terabytes of information, of proprietary information from these other sources. And I think that's the intent. Of course, we should make sure that there are safeguards to not do that, but the rule is already in place and just not being enforced. And so if it's there, it needs to be followed. Clearly, something happened along the way where that stopped being the way that we were running things. So let's at least get back to following the rule that we had implemented. And by we, I don't mean you and me. I don't think we were around for this.
No, we
but-
were not, no.
But as the agency.
I just want to make sure we're not going too far with it, right? I understand what we're trying to get to, and I think for you guys to get to what right looks like. And I think engaging the training consortium and other folks that are in it every day of what right looks like with that is a good thing. I understand what we're trying to fix with the issue that came up. So I just wanted to get that out.
No, understood. And ultimately, we're just seeking some baseline of transparency in these files in
absolutely.
accordance with the rules.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? John, we did talk a little bit about the budget yesterday. We did receive new funding. We have funding for some exceptional items, funding through the Sunset Bill, general budget funding. So we've got increases. The good news is that we'll be able to look at salaries and make some adjustments. While we're here in Austin this week, I'd like to meet with you and set the executive team salary. And then I would ask that you and staff go ahead and set the remainder of the salaries. And we'll try to get that accomplished today or tomorrow.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, let's move on, and Director Colin Grissom will give us a report on credentialing, education, and field services. Colin.
Commissioners, in your packet, you should have the report. I won't go line per line, but I would like to highlight a couple of things happening in education services. We're continuing to communicate with the regulated community. Most notably, right now, we've received 27 proposals to teach at the conference in October. Those proposals will go out to a committee of previous and future conference attendees, training coordinators, and the like, to get their input on what they want to see as consumers at the conference. So that'll be happening this week. Our education services newsletter subscribership continues to grow in our communication efforts. We're now up to 1,716 subscribers to that newsletter that Rachel and her team puts out monthly. We're very happy with that. We're seeing a high rate of use for our online cardiac emergency communications course, which delivered on my TCOLE. We've had, since its inception in December, we've had 1,290 enrollments and 1,100 completions of that course. So that's pretty good numbers for that. We're currently working on the Stress Management Officer Wellness and Suicide Prevention course that in the April meeting, you identified that as the course that we would mandate under the up to 16 hours for the next continuing education unit starting in September. We hope to have that course piloted this summer and online September 1, again available through my TCOLE. Should an agency want to deliver that face-to-face, there will be a constituent IRG where they can build their own lesson plans and do it internal to their agency or regionally through a regional training provider. In your packet, we gave some examples. Education Services has been working on a new style guide for our online training, and so that's some of the work product that's coming out. Just wanted to share some of that with you. Credentialing is, I think there's some really interesting things happening with our Target 100 communication with licensees and some of the impact that has on credentialing. The types and volume of calls we have are kind of changing. I think we're making the regulated community much more self-sufficient with the My Compliance button and the My TCOLE account. That's probably the best thing we've done for the individual licensee in years and years. Wherever we go out to speak, we get a lot of good feedback. So Jessica and her team hit the nail on the head with that. That changes the nature of what we're seeing in credentialing. We're still processing about 3,000 calls a month through credentialing. Our appointment forms are consistent. We're not seeing big trends in new appointments or F5s. Out-of-state and federal applications, you've got those numbers. Reactivations, all of those things are trending normally unless you have a question. That's just informational for you. The field services agents we see in the legislation, the kind of the face of field services changing in terms of what audits are and becoming more of a technical assistance posting with all of the things that will be coming for chief administrators. And so we're working on what that role is going to look like. Let me stop for any questions on any of that stuff. I also have, I get to play Brian today. Brian's on a much-needed respite from work, and so he's out traveling. To kind of give the finance end that due to the last session, we've seen an overall increase in funding for this biennium of $14,500,000 and some. Both our sunset bill and other legislation adds 26 full-time employees to the agency. So that's a large increase. We will be recruiting, training, and having those people hit the ground running to take action on a lot of what we've discussed today. To give kind of the breakdown, House Bill 1 in the state budget increased our funding by $9 million, almost $10 million, with 10 full-time employees. And that includes the targeted salary increases that you described, Madam Chair. A lot of it is in data services, data center, IT-driven. We are certainly a data-driven agency, and I think the legislature's starting to recognize that and fund that both with people and the resources. Senate Bill 30 provided us with $1.9 million for peace officer vehicles. As many of you know, and maybe not so many in the regulated community, field services drives rental cars or personal vehicles based on reimbursement. So this would allow us to actually field peace officer equipped vehicles for the first time, certainly in field services, and make us less dependent on secondhand vehicles. The sunset bill increased the budget by $4.6 million and added 16 FTEs and included the databases that we talked about and staff primarily in IT and legal and enforcement based on the perceived labor in that bill. I have a breakdown of what the positions are. I'm sure that'll be made available to you. I'm open for any questions to the limit that I'm not Brian.
Questions?
I just have a question regarding the credential. You said 3,000 calls a month is what you're handling?
Yeah, we average 3.
How many personnel do you have handling those calls?
We're authorized
Currently.
at 5. So credentialing staff is 5 people that handle that call volume.
Okay.
But one of the positions we got in the new bill is a new licensing and permit specialist that will actually increase that pool
To 6?
to 6.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And we'll go to Jessica Capur with our IT and Special Services report.
Good morning, Commissioners. We've mentioned the presentation already, but I just kind of want to reiterate, we're trying to bring something new to the commission meetings with these visuals that you guys have on your iPads and your notebook, but we do realize that the audience can benefit from seeing some of this as well. So we want to make this part a more regular part of the commission meetings. For the people in the audience who would like to view these materials on their mobile device, there's a QR code that we were handing out as people were walking in, or there's more in the back. If you'd like to scan that, you can pull that up on your phone. If you're watching through YouTube, the link to these materials is available in the description of the video. Now, I'd like to kind of expand on Target 100 a little bit. And I've got the target up there. Right now, we are currently at 92% compliance with telecommunicators and 91% compliance with peace officers. If you're looking for this on your iPad, it's called SB 1445 visual. It's looped in with the Sunset Bill visual.
Page 47.
Page what?
47.
Or page 47, yes. The second round of notifications went out on May 8th and 11th, and we immediately braced ourselves for what we thought was going to be a giant wave of phone calls, but that didn't happen. We didn't have the back-to-back-to-back, nonstop phone calls, all agents in the queue, on a call, and 8 people on hold waiting to get an answer. It just didn't happen that way. But when we looked at the activity in the TCOLE account and the activity on online training, we did see spikes. So I'd like to switch now. This is the last graphic in the Target 100 report that I provided. This demonstrates that despite the fact that we weren't getting all the phone calls, we were still seeing people come into compliance. So I think that just, the point here is that we managed to encourage people to continue to take their training and come into compliance without increasing our workload. And that's what Colin was speaking to, the changes that we're seeing in the way that we're interacting with people. It just further emphasizes the fact that our licensed community is receptive to tools and features that help them service their license on their own. I'd say that Target 100 is going really well. A quick comparison. I have numbers from July 9th of 2019. I have to compare to the last unit, not the last cycle, so I have to go back 4 years. But in July, we were at 10,000 people that still needed training. Today, we're at just under 7,000, and it's not quite July yet. If we keep going in the direction we're going, and if I kind of look at the trends and patterns that I'm seeing with the drop, I would say that at the same point in July, we will be at 5,000, which is half of where we were last unit. So I think it's safe to say it's going really well.
With more officers.
Yeah. Last week, we sent out a reminder to all departments asking that they submit their waiver requests to us. We want to make sure that those get documented on the training file before the August 31st deadline. So I'm speaking to the audience now. If you have any peace officers or telecommunicators who qualify for a waiver because they've been deployed in the military or have had extended medical leave, please be sure to submit your waiver now before the deadline. The email that we sent out to all department heads last week included a technical assistance bulletin that explains eligibility for the waiver and provides instructions on how to submit the waiver. So again, to reiterate, we want that on the file before August 31st so that that person doesn't fall into noncompliance. So what's next for noncompliance? We plan on trying something new again. We are going to send our first ever mass text message to appointed individuals who do not have their training yet. Now, we've never sent a text message before. We have been using emails quite a bit, not just with the the compliance Target 100 initiative, but also with my TCOLE accounts, activating accounts, resetting passwords. We're used to using email addresses, and those email addresses have been vetted in various ways, but not phone numbers. So I won't be surprised if we do end up with a high delivery failure or bounce rate, but I'm really interested in seeing what happens. The final round of notifications is going to be going out on July 18th, and we are going to follow that up with a second text message to the remaining individuals on August 1st. At that point, we are expecting to have a really small group of people. It's possible that we'll need to reassess and figure out communication again, but I don't foresee any mass communications going out after August 1st. And then as far as my TCOLE goes, we've obviously determined that self-service features are the way to go. And in fact, after the April meeting, I had a couple people here approach me and make suggestions for what they'd like to see. And it's always, I would like to know what I need to get my next certificate level. And that's a great idea. We want to make that happen. I've been wanting to do that for years. But I think right now what we are focused on is what is that my compliance page going to look like after August 31st. It gets a lot more complicated when we get into the cycle and all the various training requirements. Right now it's straightforward, telecommunicators and jailers, but we're about to introduce jailers, deputy constables, peace officers who don't have intermediate certificates yet. We have to create various views for all of these different circumstances and make sure that we're accurate. So that's what we're focused on with the my TCOLE account right now.
Next 2 years, it's crazy.
Finally, I just have 2 major IT project updates. We just this week awarded a contract to a group who is going to bring in a team of developers to augment our current team and help us build our unified login. The unified login will bring together all TCOLE applications. That's my TCOLE, TCLEDS, TSS, that's the secure share, under one login. So you only have to remember one TCOLE password. This is the first step, well, it's the second step in streamlining the whole hiring process, but it's also a really important foundational step to implementing the new requirements from the sunset. It'll help us expand our application presence with these new databases. The other big project that we have going on right now is our cloud migration. And I've been talking about this for a while. It's a difficult one because it's one that you don't see, that our licensed community aren't going to notice that they're affected by it. But it's something we've been working on for 2 years. It was recommended by DIR when we went to purchase TCLEDS. And now that we know what we're going to be doing from the Sunset Bill, it's a great move because it positions us better in terms of allowing us to develop and put into practice best practices for our development framework, as well as a stronger cybersecurity posture, and it gives us scalability. We're moving into the cloud, so we can now scale much more easily in terms of storage capacity and spinning up new servers and things like that. So that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Well, Jessica, under your leadership and John's leadership, and I know it's a whole team, but we have come so far in a very short period of time, and I know we all recognize and deeply appreciate your thoughtfulness in moving forward. A lot has been put on your plate from the commissioners as well as the legislature now, but you've taken the feedback that we've been receiving for years with the end user, our licensees in mind. And you're addressing those wants and needs, but at the same time, you're also looking at the capabilities that a lot of the new technology gives us, and you're being thoughtful and innovative and creative in finding ways to continue to elevate the communication and the, I don't know if it's a word, the usability of the website. And I very, very much appreciate what you all are doing, and it's just fantastic. I mean, when we go out, that's probably the single most positive comment I get back is the website and my TCOLE and TCLEDs and the capabilities that institutions and licensees have. And I don't know that you truly understand what that gives agencies and individuals. And just great job.
Thank you.
Fantastic job. Questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I would also like to commend the work that you're doing. Truly wonderful. I mean, every single thing that I see, I'm really impressed with your ability to even lead a team in doing all of that. And I love the visuals here that we have for the audience. I think that's really important to allow more engagement from the people that are here. Now, I do have a request, and it's kind of self-serving on behalf of the commissioners. Hopefully, they will agree with me. I have a request. When we are receiving our board book, which is fantastic, there's a lot of information here. It's 431 pages to be exact. I know there's a way to, on the table of contents, to make these links so that when we're going to credentialing, education, and field services report, we can just tap it and it takes us there. Because we spend a lot of time up here scrolling and not finding the information, even though we've reviewed it. And I think that would be quite helpful, or even underneath those areas, whatever exhibits that are attached to those different categories, or we can just tap it and it takes us to those places. I don't know if that's an easy fix or not. I feel like with you, it probably is a very easy fix, but I just wanted to just share that from a user perspective as we're moving to all of these amazing improvements that you've put into place.
I have a vision for that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. We will now move on to our enforcement reports. TJ Vineyard.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'd like to add a couple things to what Jessica said. We've been working on particularly the My Compliance and those communications, and then talking about what it will look like after September 1st. One of the things that we're making an effort, if there are people who don't reach compliance by the deadline, that we continue to post information there on how to get into compliance. So normally it moves to enforcement at that point, but we want to continue to have the same information there so that they can go and find the information themselves, that we're not relying on them to call or make phone calls. So that's part of what we're trying to integrate. And then the second part is that technical assistance bulletin that she referred to on the waivers that was so important that went out. That's available online. Anybody can get that. There is a small group that we're not communicating with. If you have an active license but you're unappointed, and for whatever reason you fell into one of those waiver groups, you can still request a waiver, so you could go online and find the information there. So in the past, some of those waivers have come in after the deadline, and we're making a real effort to make sure that information is accessible to everyone and they know how to request the waiver before the deadline. I know we have a lot to cover today. I just have updates on a few of the projects that I've been bringing to every meeting. In particular, Ratback. At the last meeting, Commissioner Hester and I had some discussions about ways to capture large groups. So right now, people that we're not subscribed to, we have to search them individually, select them, subscribe to them. So I have an admin doing that on an individual basis. Obviously, we can only do a few hundred a week like that. I'm working with DPS now to find a way that we can submit a large list of licensees, and their vendor can pull that against their database and give us the data where we could do batch subscriptions of thousands at a time. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to capture a large group. Some of those people are not going to be in the database. We understand that, but it will allow us to quickly identify and separate those groups, whereas we'd have to do them one at a time under our current process. So we're hopeful in that. We're ensuring the integrity of our data before we send it over to DPS. In addition to the efforts that we've been working on through the My Compliance and the communications, we continue to work with the large agencies. I noticed that Lieutenant Gonzalez from Harris County is here. He's one of the ones that been working with for months to make sure he has a list. They've made incredible strides with their agency, and in fact, he's kind of the example that I use when I talk to other training coordinators. He's planning for 2025 and the load that's going to create on his agency, keeping staffing in mind and educating executive staff. So that's the goal, is to make sure they understand how to use the information that's available to them, how to use the reports, how to identify risk factors within their own agency, people who've been previously reprimanded or suspended for training noncompliance, and make sure that they can make the most of that information. I've been really pleased. I think there's only 3 agencies that have more than 100 people that are not in compliance yet. So that's encouraging. The large agencies have been able to do that despite a lot of them having staffing challenges. We continue to work with the Law Enforcement Management Institute of Texas on the new chiefs and chiefs continuing ed requirements. That's a much more manageable group than all peace officer licensees, obviously. So I think that we have everyone registered and should be in compliance, and those that are running into scheduling problems, I know that they've been exceptionally patient in trying to find ways to get them into another class to make sure they can still make the deadline. They've actually expanded the capacity of some classes or rescheduled them. But I believe that we're going to be able to get all of that group in before the training deadline. The case management system has been another big project. In your notes, it says that we're doing final demonstrations, and we've actually finished those. We were able to involve a lot of our sworn staff and get feedback from them, and actually do hands-on exercises with it. We've, I think, selected the vendor that we want to proceed with. Jessica will tell you that my timelines are always aggressive. You might say they're unreasonably aggressive, but I do have the goal of getting something in place by the end of the year. We're going to start collecting a lot of pieces of data, particularly after March 1st, but I would like for anything that comes from this training compliance round to be captured in that system. As I've explained before, the system we're using now, we miss so much information that the sooner we can get that in place and start using it, then the better data and more meaningful data we'll have. So our goal is to get something in place by the end of the year. The last item I have is the fleet vehicles. We definitely appreciate the secondhand vehicles that we have. They are very functional for what we're doing, and we'll probably have to continue using those for at least a year, but I've been working with Captain Canella and Deputy Chief Grissom. We've solicited input from other sworn staff, and we're trying to identify what will best meet the needs of the agency, not just in the short term, but in the long term, understanding that the replacement challenge, we may not get the same budget items, and that we need to plan around the fact that we may have to pull equipment from one vehicle and transfer it to another vehicle, that we may only get the vehicle cost, and that we need to start projecting when we're going to have to replace those and what that will look like. So I hope to have some type of written report that executive staff can review and make a decision, and that we'll have some information that you can look at that looks at a lot of factors besides just cost and safety, but also the actual operational use by the officers, and in particular, the ability to carry that equipment that was designated by the committee, that will have rifles and heavy vests and helmets available, and that if one of our sworn personnel is in a position where they can help another agency, that they're prepared to do that.
Nice.
Does anybody have any questions?
I had a question on the chief's training, and pardon if I don't have a real working knowledge of that, but I'd had someone ask a question about that. That is mandated for them, correct? That they have to do, and it is a specific place that they have to go to
Yeah,
get
so
that?
it's in the education code. Colin can speak to this better than I can, but I'll give it a shot. So it's in the education code. It's not in the occupations code where all of the other officers' training is, so it's a little bit confusing. But if you go in there, it designates, particularly new chiefs have to complete 80 hours of training in their first 2 years as chief, and then after that, every unit, they have to complete 40 hours. But it is through the Law Enforcement Management Institute of Texas, and they have a particular class that they put on. We are updating the My Compliance language so it'll be clear. We refer to it as new chiefs and chiefs continuing ed, but the title that LEMIT uses is different. It's TCOLE 3780, and the continuing ed is Texas Police Chief Leadership Series. So we're updating My Compliance, so when they look, they'll see the same terminology that LEMIT uses, and they will know that they can go to the website and those are the classes that they need. Our goal is, part of my concern with the chiefs is we have not communicated with them well. So my big push was to communicate with the peace officers and telecommunicators, which I think they've exceeded what I hoped we could do. And the next step is to do the chiefs, that you should get a communication as soon as you're appointed that tells you what your initial period is, what the training expectations are, and that we communicate with them on the unit and cycle requirements, just like we do the peace officers. And of course, that they will be able to access the same information in the My Compliance tab of their My TCOLE account.
The concern that was brought up to me was, and again, I don't know if that's something that we're involved in at all, but the expenses, I guess, for this, that I was told it used to be, there wasn't charges, now there's charges, and I've got some rural agencies that just don't have the funding to go to that, and they were talking, that was their complaint to me, was it's getting more expensive, and we have to go. So I don't know if that's anything that we deal with or anything that they know, any avenues. I was not aware of it till he brought it up to me, and I was like, oh, okay, I wasn't aware.
So a chief, one guy? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, they're required statutorily and limit. I mean, it spells it out, they gotta go to limit, and they said it, we don't really have a.
Yeah, there are classes, Lehman holds some in Huntsville, because they're attached, to the university there, but there's classes throughout the state.
Okay.
The funding has been reduced over the years, and,
That goes without
Yeah.
saying, I understand funding issues, so that was my question was, is that something that we control, or just because I know they have to do it through, limit, so I was just asking about that.
And not to get too far off track, but I think that is one of the new LEA requirements is going to be that it's not just to set up the agency, but to continue operation, you have to show that you have the budget to
fund.
do that. And I think that's something we need to make clear early on in the process, is that that's part of the expectation. The law requires that you attend that training. And we don't have any control over it. It's set by limit, but that they have to have the funding to do that because it is required by statute.
Okay, thank you.
well, TJ, you do an exceptional job of anticipating and analyzing problems and issues, and we appreciate your proactiveness in addressing all of the various issues that you deal with and that come under your management, so thank you. Any other questions or comments? Ooh, last but not least, do you have anything for us today, Director?
Good morning once again. Commissioners, it's been a long but fun ride, and we're looking forward to transitioning to the implementation phase. Out of the 81 pieces of legislation that were filed that would make changes to Occupations Code 1701 or otherwise have a direct impact on TCOLE, 19 of those passed, and those are in the materials that are before you and displayed on the screen. There are various changes, including changes for licensing to allow for legal permanent residents who have served honorably in the U.S. Armed Forces to become licensees under Senate Bill 252, a relaxing of restrictions on temporary jailer appointments under House Bill 2183, Senate Bill 267 establishes requirements for municipal sheriff's offices, ISD or higher education agencies with 20 or more peace officers to achieve an accreditation through, it spells out a few different accrediting entities and then gives TCOLE the ability to add to that list should we find some others that are worthy. The addition of alert to the basic peace officer course and a requirement for a continuing education component to that for all peace officers, every unit under Senate Bill 1852, and some other various new and revised training requirements. I'm happy to answer any further questions that y'all might have on these or any bills either today or offline. 9 of those bills, as you can see in that next to last column, will require a rule change. It has a rule change component. Some of those rule changes will be more involved than others. Some will be a full new developed rule with the consent and advice of the advisory boards that we've been talking about. Some may just be a word change or two. As John had mentioned in the workshop yesterday, we will intend to roll those out in phases so that it's not a massive change all at once. I do want to say that the partnerships that we've been working under throughout the legislative session are just beginning. And that's not only our intent, but it's established in the Sunset Bill with establishing the advisory boards that we'll be working with, and I think it's safe to say those have proven to be very valuable for everyone involved, and we fully intend to continue those, bringing the mutual respect and desire to have all parties represented and see the outcome of whatever we're working on that everybody has a voice in and can live with. That is the end of my update on session, and I will pause there for any questions. I do want to thank you all for your support throughout. It's been tremendously helpful for all of us. I want to thank the team, the executive team, and the entire TCOLE staff is doing an amazing job, and it's a team that I've been very proud to be a part of.
Well, you've done a fantastic job, and we're really proud of the work that all of you've done.
Thank you very much. The other part of my update today has been covered, but I want to reiterate that tomorrow at 10 a.m. in the House of Representatives chamber, we will be holding the State of Texas Law Enforcement Achievement Award ceremony. We will have 41 individuals receiving the Medal for Valor. We have 7 individuals receiving the Medal for Professional Achievement and 12 receiving an award for public service. I think in the continued spirit of communication, we had made a concerted effort to get the word out about the Achievement Awards nominations, and the community delivered. We have some really incredible stories to tell tomorrow, and I hope that everybody who can be a part of that.
Thank you so much for doing that. It could be, we've talked before about the work that's being done across the state, and it seemed like for many, many years, there was just a handful of agencies that were either aware of the awards or that took the time to nominate their folks. And I want to thank that group of people also, because it takes some time, oftentimes takes some time to put together a nomination packet, and appreciate folks doing that. But I'll also state that it's a duty and obligation that we have to recognize and honor those folks. So thanks to everyone involved.
Absolutely. That concludes my report, unless you have any questions.
Questions? We are going to take a 15-minute break, please. We are going to move to agenda item number 4. And John, I know that you've already laid out a lot of information about it, but I think it may be helpful if you talk about the proposed rule from the context of what it's not. We are not setting. Not setting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, you'll look at page 72 on your materials. As you're looking at them, what you see for your consideration today is proposed Rule 211-36. This is a brand-new rule covering advisory committee operations and procedures. What this does is set forth the general procedures and framework, and as Madam Chair noted, this is not populating these advisory boards which we discussed that are required by the Sunset Bill to be formed, promulgate model policies and rules by March 1st of 2024. Again, this is not populating those advisory boards. This is merely setting out the procedures and scope of how the advisory boards are to be formed at the Commission's direction and to ultimately do the work required by the Sunset Bill and the model policy provisions. I'll go through this bill. I'll give you the general overview of it, and then if we have any questions or thoughts, and obviously this is the proposed rule today, any changes you want to make to it, we can rewrite the whole thing. We can leave it as is, or in everything in between, because this is the first reading. If it is adopted as you want to it written today, it'll go to the Texas Register, be open for public comment, and hope to bring it back in August for final approval. With that being said, let's go through the main provisions here. The role of the advisory committee, subsection A, that's a generic description of what the advisory committees will do. Of course, as we discussed earlier today, the three main advisory committees, the advisory committees under the Sunset Bill are set by the statutory language, and those will be the scope of those. Again, this is just setting out the general procedures. The appointment of advisory committee, that's subsection B. The commission shall appoint members to an advisory committee. There may be procedural steps to how you all want to do that, as that were discussed yesterday in the workshop and may be taken up in the motion or later discussion. So obviously the commission will appoint members to the advisory committee, also giving the executive director authority to designate a staff member to participate or provide subject matter expertise under the statute. And keep in mind, any of these advisory committees, as we discussed, are subject to the Open Meetings Act, subject to postings and everything that goes along with it. They will have the same requirements as you as commission members have as we move forward. Subsection C, member qualifications. Again, you won't see any specific qualifications in here. However, it is seeking a broad range of viewpoints about the work of the committee or applicable divisions. Commission members shall not serve as advisory committee members. Subsection D, composition of advisory committees. The main takeaway from this subsection is that the composition ensures representation of members from the public, agencies, organizations, and geographical regions of the state who have an interest in the subject matter of the advisory committee. Subsection E, committee size and quorum requirements. Again, subject to open meetings and all the requirements, including quorum and ex parte communications. If you could take notice of this provision, says a reasonable number of members not to exceed 12. That was what we put in the proposed is a good starting point. Whether or not that number needs to go up or down, depending on what you all envision, that's certainly subject to amendment today. Terms of service. Advisory committees may serve terms of 4 years or is otherwise designated by the commission. Obviously, you have great discretion and leeway in that. Member training requirements, and again, this goes back to open meetings and Public Information Act requirements and training, just as if they were commissioners onboarding advisory committee members will have to undergo the same amount of training. That's under subsection G and subsection H. Conflict of interest, same training commissioners have to undergo, certainly under the new statute. Subsection J, this allows the advisory committee, well, it states the advisory committee shall accept public comments made either in person or written in advance of the meetings. Subsection K, reporting recommendations. I'll read directly from this subsection because it is an important one for accountability, as was brought up in the discussion yesterday, how the advisory committees will communicate their progress or findings, whatever the case is. Recommendations of the advisory committee shall be reported to the commission at a meeting prior to the commission action on issues related to the recommendations. The recommendations shall be in writing and include any necessary supporting materials. Subsection L, the commission shall consider the written recommendations and reports submitted by the advisory committees. It's obviously more discretion whether or not you accept part, all, or whatever the case is from the advisory committee findings. Reimbursement, we are authorized and may reimburse advisory committee members for their travel. Obviously, this was authorized in the statute, and we wrote reimbursement for these provisions into our fiscal note for the Sunset Bill. Expiration dates for advisory committees, that's subsection N. Unless a different expiration date is established, each advisory committee is abolished on the 4th anniversary of its creation by the commission. And that's the rundown on the procedural requirements for the advisory committees. If you have any questions or comments.
Well, I suspect that there will be some discussion
Sure.
and comments. Yes, ma'am.
One I had was on section C. It talks about commission members shall not serve as advisory committee members. One of the things I thought about was just thinking, okay, it really doesn't define. It just says commission members. So I think we need to add some verbiage in there, either something like currently appointed commission members, that, so that, you know, if a commission member it comes off of the commission, that they can also be advisory committee members.
Understood. Commissioner Atkins, I will add the language in subsection C, prior to commission members shall not serve as advisory committee members. I will insert before the words commission members, currently serving
Serving, okay.
is
I had appointed, but it just,
currently appointed.
whatever. Yeah.
You got it.
Yes, and I'd like to echo that because that was one of my questions in workshop yesterday. So I think the clarification is really important.
You woke everyone up.
Apparently.
Were you going to say something?
It's like
Yes.
a gate.
Yeah, it's like, when we talk about in that same member qualifications, I think if we're not very specific, especially when you talk about the broad range of viewpoints, there may be some concern, especially from the law enforcement community, on the types of people that would want to be on the commission, right? And without specific things listed here to disqualify people, we're not saying they all have to be badge and gun commission folks, but they should at least be eligible for appointment, i.e. no felonies, those types of things, right? Whether they're sworn or not sworn. And so I don't know if that was discussed or not, but to me it would, something if they were eligible for, or met eligibility requirements that all peace officers have to meet, right? As far as, you know, no felonies, no A or Bs in the certain time frame. I think that would be very important to add in this section.
Do you have any specific language in mind, or just if we capture that idea? Yes.
What is this section in 1701? Hold on a minute.
While you're looking that up, may I comment a little bit?
Sure. Yes, ma'am.
On that, on your comment. One of the items here, what is that, in B, that ultimately we, the commission, will make the appointment. We'll be voting on that.
She's bringing up.
So I think, yes, while I do think we should maybe look into a person's background, I also think we'll get a list of those proposed advisory board members. I think we would all do our due diligence in researching each of those people as well, because I don't know, I'm just thinking about being on advisory committees, right, overall. A lot of them don't do background checks, especially on public members, and I'm not saying that's not important, but what I'm saying is if we have a lot of feedback from the commission, it's probably going to be people that, based on whatever they do in their current life, that essentially they wouldn't be in those roles if they had something in their background. Does that make sense? I'm trying to speak to it that way. But I do understand your concern. I'm not saying I'm against that idea. I feel like if you are a current law enforcement officer and we put you on the advisory board, then we essentially know that you are compliant.
Right.
If you are currently serving in another role, like, school board member, for instance, we already know you've had a background check. Like, those are the types of people that we probably all know. If you're a current lawyer, we already know that you've been checked, right, your background. So I think it just kind of depends overall, but that's kind of my take. I just feel like by the makeup of this commission, that we probably wouldn't approve someone anyway if we just really had no idea and they were just a random person with no background that we could actually check. Does that make sense?
No, Commissioners, if I could make a comment, I think maybe it might be an important piece of information that may or may not resolve Commissioner Hester's concern. It may not, but the process of how they're going to be populated with relation to approval by the presiding officer, or however the commissioners want to handle that. I don't know if that proposal would resolve the issues that Commissioner Hester is raising. It goes to what you said. as ultimate approval would come from the commissioner via the presiding officer, if I'm understanding our conversation yesterday and what I understand the process is going to be proposed today. I just wanted to throw that comment out there for consideration, whether or not that would address that concern or not.
So some of the discussion yesterday was, obviously, we have some significant, it's not on the screen anymore, we have some significant time restraints, right, by which we have to implement these model policies, not to mention actually creating these committees and all that. So we were talking about, we needed to get this rule moving today. Of course, we'll go through the process and it'll be finally approved at the next meeting. But having that in mind, we were discussing how do we go ahead and get the committee formed. It's very clear in the language of the statute that it is the commission's responsibility to create these advisory boards, so by extension, approve who the members are on them. But again, with less than 9 months to get it formed and have them do all of their work, get it back to us, the commission approve it, we're operating really on like 6-7 months time. So that was a lot of the discussion yesterday in workshop. And, one step is certainly going to be approving the rule once we've gone through all this, parsed the language, and made these corrections, like the one that Commissioner Lamont Dixon and Commissioner Atkins mentioned. That was a great addition. In addition to that, I think what was contemplated by the commission yesterday was something along the lines of directing staff and then working through the presiding officer to go ahead and move forward with selecting these members and letting them begin to do some work. So the scope of the work overall is already defined by statute, right? That's in the Sunset Bill. Beyond that, so I don't think there are concerns there about the scope of their work. I don't think we need to comment on that. It's pretty clear what needs to be formed. But that leaves us with directing the creation of the board. So I was thinking that we direct staff with some kind of language, for an example, in consideration of the time restraints for creation of the various advisory committees and completion of the legislatively mandated work, the commission directs staff to begin selection of members for all advisory committees with collaboration and approval of members by the presiding officer, to later be discussed and ratified by the entire commission. So we will come back August. This should all be done by then. I anticipate, I think everyone anticipates on both sides here, that these committees are going to be formed and they should begin diligently working prior to August. I don't think we have the time to wait until then. So I think with some kind of language like that, we're still involved in the process. We're not abdicating our duties just to staff. We're working as the commission through the presiding officer, but that lends flexibility and the ability to move forward with it. Of course, if something happens before then, I mean, we still have discretion ultimately to remove someone. That's also contemplated in the rule. So if you're comfortable with that, I mean, it's something obviously all 7 of us here today have to agree on, that will go through the PO. So, and I think that's what the interim executive director was mentioning, like, does that ease your mind at all in some of that? Of course, some of the members are not going to be lawyers, school board, law enforcement. They're going to be probably people who were very involved in the last, it's not even 6 months, it's the last year really, preparing for session, being in session, this alphabet soup that Director Grigsby told us about earlier of groups, agencies, individuals involved. So some of them, like you're saying, are not going to be having prior vetting.
So I agree with you. I think for this first set, it's probably going to be that way. But my concern is that later down the road, 2 years, 4 years later down the road, there are going to be people that are going to want to be on these advisory committee meetings that may have an alternative agenda and may be otherwise disqualified from being a peace officer because of felony convictions or other things that are in their background. And without explicit authority or explicit rule to cull them out,
Yeah.
that the future commissioners are gonna be put in a situation that I think we can alleviate now.
On the front end.
On the front end to say, hey, I agree with, we gotta get it done. And I have no problem, letting staff do that with the presiding officer and get things going, because we are under a crunch. But when we're talking about proposing a rule that has it, I think having somewhat that these members should meet the eligibility requirements in 1701. So, or not have a disqualification for that portion. And
1701, though, is specific to law enforcement. Right?
But what we're talking about is no felony convictions, no A or Bs in the last 10
Right.
years.
I'm just saying we can't cite 1701 if they're going to be members of the advisory board that aren't law enforcement. But I think what you're saying is, I agree with you. I think it's a great idea. I'm glad you brought it up, that we include language that's something like subject to background investigation.
It's subject to the disqualification list. Disqualification is listed in Chapter 1701. I'm not saying that they all have to be peace officers, because that's not the intent of the legislature either. They put in there, hey, you need to have a cross-representation.
I just need to look at the language. I need to see the language to tell you if I agree with that or not.
For the purposes of discussion, or a starting point at least, how about subject to the requirements and qualifications under Chapter 1701 and 37 Texas Admin Code 211 through 229? So we have both the 1701 covered and the rules. And that's just
Yes.
for an idea for discussion.
Yes, something from the TAC as well.
Yes. Perfect. I like that.
Also on B, it talks about each advisory committee shall elect from its members a presiding officer. Hopefully this would not occur, but theoretically it could, where you had a group that wouldn't, may not be able to come to a consensus on the presiding officer. Thoughts from my colleagues on adding some language, committee shall elect from its members a presiding officer during their first meeting, and if unable to do so, then it would default to the executive director, to where that way we get going and we don't end up with a committee that meets and meets and meets and doesn't move forward with it, so.
I've proposed language. The commission shall appoint members, that's what it says right now, to an advisory, each advisory committee shall elect from its members a presiding officer. I'm thinking just leave it as general as possible. From there, say, or one may be appointed by the presiding officer, who shall report the advisory committee's recommendations to the commission.
No, I like that, it's
Just
more
a-
general, yes.
In case they're not able, something happens.
That
Commissioner
works.
Burris, one more time. I didn't hear the
The
entire
actual
passage.
language to stick in would be, to add would be, or one may be appointed by the presiding officer.
And that's in subsection B, correct?
B, correct.
Third sentence. On section E, are we good with the number? We don't have to appoint, whatever that number is, we don't have to appoint that number, but once we set a number, we can't go over it without having, we'd have to
Change in rule.
we'd have to change the rule essentially. Any discussion? Yes,
Just one
ma'am.
question. Should the number be an odd number? Just thinking about voting and things like that. Typically, I just see odd numbers, just in case there's a split, there's not ever a tie. That was my only question.
So is your pleasure 11 or 13?
I guess 11, since some people think 13 is unlucky.
How suspicious.
I mean, I like 12, but I think an odd number is probably best, just in case.
So so we're essentially looking at 9, 11, 13, 15,
Or 15, yeah.
so,
I'm just concerned with expanding it, getting the
Yes.
interest from the public, getting that number.
yes. Well, we
I'm
don't have to
kinda
appoint
reluctant.
that. That's the beauty of
It's
it.
up
It says
to, right.
Up to, so,
But I guess wherever we
But-
land, maybe it should be an even number. Even if it's 7, I mean, I just think, I'm sorry, an odd number.
I think the point of the committee, though, is for their thoughts, their ideas, and for them to collectively create
good point.
a work product for us then to look at and review. So I can't imagine if they're having to vote and it's a one, over, if it's 50-50, that they need to go back and keep working on it till it's something that everyone can agree on, I think.
Good point.
Yeah, I'm open. I'm just throwing out suggestions.
It's all because the number 13 is scary.
Yeah, not 13.
So are we good with 12?
I mean, it does say not to exceed 12. I just think sometimes when you come down to maybe a final point, there may be some deliberation, and if they had to essentially say, well, let's just vote on that one item, it's an odd number, and it can move forward.
I mean, ultimately, I think they're going to bring the product to us, and if there's debate
Well,
on it,
that's
we're going to
true.
make the decision. So they're
That's
not
true.
making the ultimate
final
decision.
decision,
So they
yes.
could bring forward two proposals to us and see what we think.
Okay, 12?
Unless the
12?
presiding
We are at
officer
12
not
as,
required to vote, unless there's a tie. We have that with one of our advisory committees. Is 12, say you have 12, but we do have a presiding officer of the committee. And the way my advisory board is, he does not vote, or he or she is not a voting member or he doesn't vote unless there's a tie that needs to be broken.
I like that.
I don't know if that's language we want to put in there, but that is.
I think that's self-regulation within the committee
That's good.
and something that staff can discuss with them.
any other
Good with the number.
comments, suggestions, proposed changes?
I think we did.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I will make a motion to approve the proposed rule 211.36 with the amendments stated.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
As a matter of housekeeping, the language that I talked about earlier on about directing, I think it's important just to make sure on the record if everyone is in agreement or not with, we need to know, with the presiding officer going ahead and approving kind of this preliminary group for later ratification by the entire commission. So I would just state, I'll state the same thing just to make it formal, kind of make a record that, again, in consideration of the time restraints for creation of the various advisory committees and completion of the legislatively mandated work, the commission directs staff to begin selection of members for all advisory committees with collaboration and approval of members by the presiding officer to later be discussed and ratified by the entire commission. Go forth.
Thank you for the direction. Understood.
One quick,
Oh, go ahead.
are we able to make any suggestions as a commission? Like just to send a name, not to say that that's who you pick?
Of course.
Okay, just
Oh.
wanted to clarify.
Yeah, we welcome it, absolutely, please, by all means.
One more housekeeping matter. we need to take action on the reports. We just
Oh, thank
took a-
you,
We
thank
just
you.
took a break.
Thank you.
So-
I didn't have that on my, let's go back
I-
to,
yeah.
yeah, we'll go back to agenda item number 3. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to accept the reports as written.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. We are now going to move to agenda item number 5, which involves a Class A waiver under TCOLE Rule 217.1. Director Beecham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next, Commissioners, for your consideration is a Class A waiver submitted by Chief Banks of the Round Rock Police Department on behalf of Dennis Ryan. This is for a 2005 California disposition for battery, which is equivalent to a Texas Penal Code Class A misdemeanor. For your consideration is the waiver by Chief Banks. Major Vineyard is available if you have any specific questions prior to Chief Banks's presentation for your consideration.
Gentlemen, if you'd like to come up to the mic and introduce yourselves, and Chief, if you'll speak. If you'd like to speak first about your request for the waiver, we'd appreciate it.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Commissioners, appreciate it. Good morning to each and every one of you. Thank you for your time in this matter. We are requesting the Class A waiver for Officer Dennis Ryan. I want to introduce myself. I am Alan Banks, and Police Chief of Round Rock. I'm honored and blessed to be the Police Chief. I have served in law enforcement for over 31 years. Originally served in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Retired out of there in 2014, so I served from 1992 to 2014. My calling to this occupation happened when I was in the 3rd grade, and I knew that I wanted to be in law enforcement at that point. And that's the way I served and lived my life until the time I had the opportunity to join the police department in Albuquerque in 1992. I served honorably, and I took this profession seriously. And when I had the opportunity to come to Round Rock to be the police chief in 2014, I set a set of core values for our department. I told every one of our members of our department that we will live by the standards of CHIP, community, honor, integrity, and pride. And it stands strong today. Communities first. I told them, take that chip off your shoulder, make it a positive chip. In this profession, we honor our community. We take care of our community. We work with our community. We do it with honor, we do it with integrity, and we do it with pride. We don't stick our chests out. We're not above the law. We're proud to wear this uniform. We're proud to honor this profession. Every one of my hires that come before me, before we give them that conditional offer, will know those core values of our department. And again, they run strong to this day. I don't stand here to make excuses about our background investigation on Officer Dennis Ryan. It was an oversight on our part, and I take full responsibility for that mishap. It was a poor interpretation of the California Penal Code of this incident that happened in 2005, but for us, that mistake turned out to be positive for the city of Round Rock. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about Officer Dennis Ryan. So we hired him in May of 2018. He's been with us approximately 5 years now. In that time, he became a threat liaison officer, a TLO as we call them, and that is a select few officers in our department who can achieve that classification. He has become a field training officer, an amazing informal trainer, an informal leader for our department. He also learned to become a lead breacher for our SWAT team. And on top of that, he is training our department in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in order to keep them safe out in the streets. Some of the awards that Officer Dennis Ryan has received in the 5 years, one of which is the Meritorious Service Award for actions is not only protecting the lives of officers, but protecting the life of a man who had a gun and was threatening to harm others. Many recognitions within our department from our communities. he has served in many, many community events, a lot of them without us even asking him, some of which include National Night Out, Fit for Moms, Leander High School Air Force JROTC Car Show and Barbecue, Meet and Greet at Bradford Park Community, our Hike for Hunger event, and one thing, if you allow me the opportunity, I want to read a letter that one of his supervisors wrote within a year of him working at our department. He says, while doing random video reviews, I came across a call which I believed is worthy of recognition. Below is my entry for your July video review. On July 9, 2019, at 19:59 hours, Officer Ryan observed a male standing in the roadway panhandling. I observed the following. As you approached the violator, you spoke with him and advised why you were approaching. You advised the reason for the contact and violation. You quickly created a positive dialogue with the person by being respectful. The violator advised he was trying to get some water because he was thirsty. You advised him after the contact you would provide him with a bottle of water. By making small talk, you were able to get some intel about the offender on where he was going, coming, and his future plans. The entire contact was professional, respectful, to the point, and safe. You kept good on your word and gave the homeless man some water. The man was very appreciative and thanked you multiple times. Dennis, I just happened by chance to click on this video. I never heard of this contact, didn't know you made it, and you never told me about it. With that said, I'm truly impressed with your abilities to speak with people and your sincere willingness to treat people as humans despite their situation. Your officer safety was great while being kind. Great job, keep up the great work. Servants' hearts is what I require in my department. Full transparency. Dennis has received discipline in the last 5 years. He served that discipline without any problems, and it's only been 2 occasions. None of those disciplines have been from anybody within our communities. Those were internal issues that we dealt with. Officer Ryan is dedicated to this profession. He has demonstrated this over the past 5 years. I have the luxury, I have the honor to work with each and every one of my officers in my department. I know Dennis's heart. He knows when to use that servant's heart. He knows when to be a guardian and or a warrior. I believe in Officer Ryan, and I'll tell you this. Again, I appreciate each and every one of you, and I pray that you grant him the waiver. And I believe in him so much that I will tell you this today, and not to be dramatic, is if you as a commission told me to give up my license so he can keep his, I would. So I thank each and every one of you, and I stand for any questions.
Questions for the chief? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Officer Ryan.
Good morning, Commission. Thank you for having me today. My name is Dennis Ryan. I've been serving as an officer for the Round Rock Police Department for the last 5 years, the last 3 of which were acting as a field training officer and a member of the SWAT team. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Commission staff that was burdened with the responsibility of addressing this matter for their professionalism, their diligence, and their understanding. I'd also like to thank the Commission and the Director for their considerations in this matter. It's been a long time. It's taken a long time, and it's taken a lot of hard work for me to become the person and the husband and the father and the officer that I am today. I think it's safe for me to say that Chief Banks would agree that I've served the community of Round Rock under his leadership and the supervision of the rest of the department as a model officer and with a great sense of honor and integrity and pride. And with the blessing of the Commission, I look forward to continuing that service for a long time to come. Any questions?
I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ryan, we've read your packet, and Chief, it was a very thorough packet. Appreciate all the information that you and your team put together. But Ryan, what have you done? What changes have you made in your life that would prevent you from exhibiting the same behavior that you previously exhibited?
So, you know, I went through a long period of self-analyzation to try to figure out, you know, what caused me to be in those situations to begin with. And a common factor in those situations was alcohol. So the primary change that I've made in my life is abstaining from alcohol for close to about 10 years now. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. The situations that I found myself in those incidents, by removing that element of my life, I've been able to prevent myself from being in those situations, amongst other things. I mean, therapy, martial arts, you know, focusing my life now on service, right? Whether it's service to my family or the communities that I'm involved with. I occupy my time with positivity and constructive behavior that'll help me, my family, and the communities.
And then, Chief, I have a question for you. And I know that you don't have a crystal ball and can't absolutely foresee the future. But how do you know, or what gives you peace that the past incidents were isolated and that they won't emerge and happen again?
Madam Chair, thank you for that question. You're absolutely right. I can't predict the future, but here's what I can tell you. I have a strict standard in the way I run my police department. I don't, any behavior like that, zero tolerance. I don't tolerate that behavior. But in the last 5 years, I've had the opportunity to observe Officer Dennis Ryan and the way he's worked with the community, the way he's worked with the department. I can tell you right now, I wish I could have brought all 260 people from my department that would stand in this room today and support Officer Ryan, because they all wanted to. And I truly believe that he sees that, and his heart is to take care of the community and not let down this community, and most importantly, the law enforcement community. And as long as I'm here as the police chief and those standards stay in place, those core values stay in place, and he knows my philosophies, he knows my faith, and I truly, honestly believe that he is going to continue to be that model officer that he has been in the last 5 years.
Yes, ma'am.
I think for me, a few things. One, I feel that even though Officer Ryan has made substantial, I think self-reflection is really important, and I think you've done that due diligence and have worked on improving some aspects of your life, and I honestly feel that it's even more profound for you to essentially be in a department with a chief that, from what we were learning today, that your type of leadership. I mean, I think the combination sometimes is also really important when we're looking at those types of things. I guess for me, one of the items is that you were forthcoming in your pre-employment. So to me, that shows a level of integrity that a lot of people just don't have. People lie on applications and pre-employment screenings all the time. So I think you were forthcoming, and for me, that means a lot, that it was there. And then I think some of the things that the chief said about you, in particular, your focus on service and those types of the community events that you go to, the fact that you reached out to someone And no one knew that, right? You just did it on your own. You didn't have to report it, but you've done it. So I think for me, it's the question is always, you know, who are you when no one else is looking, right? So when you're just in your own space. And so when I look at everything that I've read here and connecting all of the dots, yes, I think there are things, of course, in your past that I don't like at all and find questionable. But looking at the path that you have taken, I believe you have done the work to be a better human being, a better citizen, and a better officer. And I think, you know, as a person of faith as well, that I feel like you've almost been led to a particular department that emulates that. And I think that's very good. So I don't really have a question. Those are just my comments and my thoughts on the scenario. And for me, I hope that going forward in whatever that is, whether it's in the department or something else, I can't speak for my colleagues, that you continue on that path. You're welcome.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Dixon. If I might add, Madam Chair, I absolutely agree with you 100%. When we put on this uniform and this badge, it means something. It means something. This isn't a job. This uniform and this occupation, it's a privilege to do this. It's not a right. And he truly believes that. Having these conversations, even when we received the news that we had to take him off the streets and out of uniform, and we've had these long conversations, I'm able to see his heart. And I wish you could see his heart. You know, we're sitting up here for 5 and 10 minutes, but I truly believe, and the question you asked, Madam Chair, is how do I know what's going to happen in the future? I'm looking at his heart, and I truly believe that his heart belongs in this uniform and wearing this badge and wearing this patch on his shoulder to honor this profession.
Chief. Yes. I will absolutely echo the comments by Commissioner Lamont Dixon. I appreciate the recognition of the personal issues that you've had, the addiction issues, because I believe alcoholism is addiction just like anything else, and the fact that you've committed to being sober, that's huge. I know it takes an incredible amount of work to do that, and it is a daily challenge. I also appreciate your passion for law enforcement, your work for the citizens of Round Rock, everything you've done, and your commitment to service. I often tell the commission, this group, and staff, I look at everything as a potential case. So that's my nature. That's how I look at things. And being a former prosecutor, I absolutely look at that as well. So the ages at which you committed certain offenses, prior, early 20s, but the two big ones being at 24 and 32, there's sufficient amount of growth from my perspective at this point to have made some changes. And again, I appreciate it takes some people much longer than others. I have family members that I see that in myself, and I recognize that. I do see, though, that it went beyond these two kind of more significant events. There were other prior offenses involved, and they were big things. I mean, in addition to the kind of racing on a highway, however California classifies that, that is a Class B misdemeanor in Texas. The California battery, which in Texas is an assault, that's a Class A. And the 3 charges in 2013, there were actually 3, which great. Again, we read the reports. It's 350 pages that you all submitted. There's a lot of great information in there for us to see a whole picture of you. It wasn't just everything bad, and it wasn't just he's a great guy. It was a really good full picture. But those charges did include what in Texas would be an aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and that's a third-degree felony. Again, it was dismissed, and you pled in essence to a disorderly conduct, and I could absolutely see in the report kind of those inconsistencies that the chief had laid out in his report there. I could see where, as a prosecutor, that's something that I would have considered and potentially done as well. From the prosecution perspective, there's a big however here. Having an officer with so many arrests puts every single case that you could come forward in, every arrest that you make, it puts those trials at stake and all those cases at stake, which, in my opinion, puts the interests of the public at risk. So those individuals that you may have helped, victims in those crimes, now have potentially, they may not receive justice as they would like to. And I believe ultimately the public, the citizens of Texas deserve to be served by law enforcement officers demonstrating excellent character and who are educated and trained at the highest levels. And I know that is where you are today. Again, unfortunately, looking at everything as a potential case, my belief is that if you continued a career in law enforcement, it would be a disservice not only to the public, but actually to you for some of those reasons that I just stated. If you were a lead investigator ultimately on a murder trial or a capital case, your record is something that absolutely you would be grilled on for, I can't imagine how many hours, but it would be hours on cross-examination. And again, I feel it puts all those cases in jeopardy. I think that's something important for us to look at. Oftentimes when we're making these decisions, we have some youthful indiscretions. That happens a lot, and those are cases that they get brought before us. Of course, this one comes before us, and it does because it's really challenging. I think it's very clear, and from the comments here today, I don't think anyone is saying that here, as you stand before us today, we think you have some type of character flaw or integrity issues. I don't think that's the issue at all. I think the reasons that I laid out for me is what makes it a challenge to approve the waiver at this point.
Thank you for your comments, and I do appreciate those comments, and trust me, those are things that I have to consider as a police chief, and I do, and I did in this case as well. But I want to play devil's advocate to that. This is a man who has been through that, and he's dealt with that, and he's also been arrested as a result of some of those cases. This is a man who can go out with empathy into our society and talk to victims or talk to offenders that have gone through this. I read a letter of a homeless man on the side of the street that he actually, he could have been a different person there. He's showing his differences. I don't know of a perfect police officer. I'm not perfect. I might not have the charges that he had or dealt with or had to overcome to be a better police officer, to be a better man. He has a family now, a daughter, that he has to understand and realize he's doing this for her as well. And I get the court, the court proceedings, we've done that. He's not on a Brady bill. And if those are questions that he's going to have to answer, just like a lot of our police officers who have some backgrounds that could be questionable. They have to answer to those. I believe in his character. I believe in this man, and I absolutely agree and understand where you're coming from. But I also understand the fact that he can stand in front of an offender or suspect and have honest conversations with them to help change their lives because of his history. So thank you for those comments, ma'am.
Thank you.
Just a couple of things. Chief, thank you very much for showing up and speaking on Dennis's behalf. Very thorough report. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
All the details that went into it and the investigators that supported it. My question is to Dennis. In looking at the information that we have, and this is all on paper, This is all I'm seeing here.
Yes, sir.
I'm looking at you, and I'm not seeing in here where you're taking responsibility, or do you take responsibility for your actions? Are you continuing to defend yourself in your actions on that day, or do you see anything
No.
here
No,
that was
absolutely not, sir.
inappropriate?
No, absolutely not. The actions involved in all those incidences were completely unacceptable. But I think the greatest indication that I've accepted responsibility for my behavior in those situations has been the changes that I've made in my life to prevent myself from being in situations like that moving forward. As Chief just pointed out, I have a family now, right? I have 2 little girls at home and a wife. The service mentality that I carry with me daily is geared towards them, making sure that I come home safe every night, but I'm also doing the best job that I can at work to progress, to continue to serve the community of Round Rock and the department in the best form that I can, be the best person I can for them. I wholeheartedly take responsibility for my actions back then, and I've made the changes necessary in my life to prevent them from happening in the future.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Madam Chair, I think it's important to note when you talk about eligibility requirements and what agency administrators have to go through when they're doing a background investigations, it's important to note, and I think Commissioner Burris pointed some of this out. You know, there's a process that these go through the courts, and, you know, a lot of these charges were outright dismissed or changed to other things, right? And so I think when things are outright dismissed for whatever reason, that might be interest of justice or there wasn't sufficient evidence or anything else, that personally, I just don't think that should be held against somebody, right? It's not, if there's not a conviction for that. And, you know, having reviewed files for police officer applicants for a number of years and seeing that I know what goes through, and then when the chiefs look at those and make that call whether or not they're gonna take a chance on that person. And while everything wasn't exactly to the level correct that was done in the background, Chief knew when he saw it, right? He was, as Commissioner Dixon said, everything was there. It was up front. It was an oversight on that part. So, you know, I just think it's important to note that out on those charges that do get ultimately dismissed for whatever reason they are.
Well, I think more accurately stated, the investigating officer from your department said he overlooked, or he didn't quite understand what one charge meant in a different state to hear, and he should have requested further reports and records to look at that. And I do not blame you and your department for the challenges involved there. The further investigation absolutely should have been done. That was not correct. Reports should have been looked at. Doing a lot of federal work, as I do, this is a really big issue in terms of sentencing for, I do criminal defense work at the federal level now. And so I've made all these arguments that you all are making before courts and individuals for, 15 years. But that specific portion is really challenging. And in fact, the government on the United States probation side, they reach out to their counterparts in other states to figure out, what exactly does this charge mean when you bring it to Texas? Was it comparable to? And you have to go back and look at not only you're not looking at what it is today, you're looking at what was the language in 2003 or 2013, and there's a lot that goes into it, and I know I do it on my side for my clients. It's very challenging to do that, and it always leads to very long objections and arguments in court. So I definitely recognize and can appreciate the challenges there. I would suggest in the future, if there's any questions, reach out to TCOLE just to make sure that you're on the, you know, that you're correct in your assessments of those things. They're very challenging, and, you know, we may not be in this situation today, now, you know, but for looking at those things a little more closely. So, again, I think I advocate everyone reaching out. If you have any questions on criminal history like that, just reach out to TCOLE at the outset. We've got a lot of people here today. I'm looking at TJ, who will go into that.
So Chief, what processes have you changed or put in place so that this scenario does not occur again?
So thank you for that. Appreciate, again, Commissioners, thank you for your comments. And I absolutely needed change in regards to, so this does not happen again. One is state legislation kind of forced us to do some things. So the other thing is we're actually sending our recruiters and or background investigators to other states, to other agencies. And I just want to be clear, we had the reports, and Officer Ryan, when he was asked for those reports, gave us the reports. And I'm not going to make excuses of what happened. Ultimately, it falls on me. I'm the police chief. I'm the head of the agency. It falls on me. It's my responsibility, and I will take full responsibility for that. But going forward, and the investigator in this case is no longer allowed to do investigations. And then we also have a policy in place that we will be reaching out to TCOLE if we have any questions on any further incidents such as this one.
Any other questions or comments? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve the waiver.
Second.
Okay, Sarah, we're going to do a roll call vote. If you will go from the bottom up of the roll call, please. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes. Congratulations.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The waiver's only good for Chief Banks, so we're clear.
Yes. But congratulations, Officer Ryan. Congratulations, Chief. I will say to you, and I think I speak on behalf of all of us, but the profession, but you've been given a second chance here today. I hope you look at it as a blessing. I think you're working, I think you're in the perfect place right now. And I suspect it's one of the reasons for the rule is that it's good for you and your department. Enough of us see it working, and a lot of that's because of you, Chief.
Thank you, ma'am.
But you have a great responsibility. To your chief, who went to bat for you and put his reputation on the line for you. But your fellow colleagues, because as we all know, those of us in law enforcement clearly understand that the actions of one can tarnish the badge of all of us. So not only do you have a responsibility to your colleagues there in Round Rock, but to all of law enforcement who wears that badge. You also have an obligation to your family to your child, and to the commission here for allowing this to come before us for the vote. So we have high expectations of you. We also wish you all the very best of luck. And if there's anything we can do to assist, we are here.
Madam Chair, thank you. Commissioners, thank you. We won't let you down. And to the TCOLE staff, thank y'all. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
We'll move to agenda item number 6, and we do not have the Attorney General's office here with us today. So, Mr. Beecham.
I'll see if I can remember how to do this. It's been a decade or so, or maybe longer than that. Commissioners, for your consideration are default suspension orders for licensees who action was taken against their license. These licensees failed to respond in a timely manner to the petition sent to their last known address on file with TCOLE. For your consideration, entry of default suspension orders for Isaiah Gardea, Lisa Persley, and Quentin Vergine for your consideration.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we enter into the default suspension orders for Isaiah Gardea, Lisa Persley, and Quentin Virgin.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Commissioners, next for your consideration are default cancellation orders. In these instances, a petition was sent to these licensees for cancellation of their licenses, jailer licenses, in these two instances for failing to meet minimum standards at the time of licensure. For your consideration, the cancellation of the licenses of Troy A. Dively and Jariah John for your consideration.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we enter into default cancellation orders for Troy Dively and Jariah John.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Commissioners, rounding out the disciplinary list, you'll see for your information only that do not require any commission actions are the statutory suspensions based on receipt of licensees receiving felony deferred adjudications. You'll see statutory revocations. These licensees' license were revoked automatically under statute as a matter of law for felony convictions. You'll see permanent surrenders are the next category, and reprimands for administrative violations for your information only.
We are going to move to agenda item number 7, which is a discussion of a strategic plan. I'm going to ask the two co-chairs of the two subcommittees related to these, if they would please provide just a brief update on progress or where you're at. So for item number 7, Commissioner Atkins.
Just as we discussed yesterday, we are looking at not only the description for the job for the ED position, but taking our strategic plan and the evaluation tool that we have, we're incorporating all that it's a kind of a puzzle piece to put together. So we expect some progress here pretty soon.
And moving on to, since no action needs to be taken, agenda item number 8, talking about the qualifications, process procedures for the executive director position. Commissioner Burris.
Yes, as discussed yesterday, we're back online with the process. We had suspended it during the legislative session. Technically, they are still in session with at least a couple special sessions that we know of coming. We don't believe there's any further items that will be taken up by the legislature that will affect the agency, and certainly not the hiring of the executive director. We are planning on meeting here in short order, going back, revisiting some of the prior lists of qualifications that have been laid out It was previously posted. Of course, there are some changes and considerations that we're taking post-sunset and post-budget changes and all these things. So all of that will need to be incorporated into the new posting, and we'll be working closely with Commissioner Atkins' committee as they do their work, since the two are very closely tied together. The evaluation is something that obviously any prospective executive director will want to know clearly stated up front. So we'll be working with them.
Okay, and no action needs to be taken on that. We'll move to 9, which is discuss and take action on legislative items to include exceptional items, performance measured, data information. Director Beecham, do you have anything on this?
I have nothing to add, Madam Chair.
Any action, questions, comments related to this? Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 10, which is to receive comment from the public. You are welcome to make comment, but understand that we can take no action regarding any comments you may have. Okay. I don't see a line of people moving forward, so we will move on to agenda item number 11, which is executive session. We will be going into executive session. I believe it will be a brief executive session, but have no control of that. So we are going to need to ask folks to vacate the room, and we will call you back in when executive session is completed and so we'll move to agenda item number 12, which is take action on reports or discussions from executive session. Do we have a motion? Do we have a motion on the executive director salary?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to increase the executive director's salary to the amount set by the legislature at $163,428 per year.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We will move to agenda item number 13, which is adjourning. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. And we are adjourned.